Welcome to Eastman's Hunting Journals Podcast Edition. I'm your host, Ike Eastman. Today's special guest is Jordan Breshears. Now, if you've been following us at all, you probably have noticed or seen Jordan's episodes on TV or Beyond the Grid. Saw some of his writing in the magazines. He's done Idaho MRS for us for a number of years. Jordan's been around off and on with our stuff for about 10, 15 years. He also has a really interesting story on what he was doing when he wasn't working for us, hunting in the field. He might glow like Homer Simpson from The Simpsons. He may be involved in the nuclear world. He's got a really interesting family life. He's got a really interesting story. And he is the second Olympian I've had on the podcast. So check it out. Let's listen to Jordan and his interesting life of an Olympic shooter, as well as all the other cool things that he's done. This episode is sponsored by Secure, the gun storage system. Have you ever wondered the best way to store your guns, ammo, and actually all your valuables? There is a fine line between safety and accessibility. There's also something to be said about being able to customize your safe for your needs. If you're storing long guns, handguns, ammo, or just need a wall to hang your equipment on, Secure It has your back. They have cabinets, rooms, and everything in between. Secure It. This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Silencer Central. Silencer Central, thank you for supporting us. If you would like to support Silencer Central, if you have any interest in a silencer, which I encourage because it is a game changer in the field, check out silencercentral.com. They will walk you through the paperwork online, as well as they can ship that silencer directly to your doorstep. So check them out and tell them Ike sent you. Jordan Breshears, thanks for coming, man. It's we've never got to sit down and just chat. I know a lot about your life, but I'm sure there's going to be lots of fun things I learn here. In you know what your passions are, and we'll dig into. You've had a very glowing career.
Yeah. True story. Yeah.
So you grew up in Spokane?
Yeah, Spokane.
And grew up hunting and fishing. As a kid, or who taught you?
My dad. He had me in a backpack before I could walk. He was taking me hunting with my. Thinking back on it, it's a little crusty to figure I didn't have hearing protection and he didn't have hearing protection, and I was 9 months old in a backpack. But
that's why you walk around now and go, huh?
Yeah. But yeah, Dad loved being in the woods, and he was into archery and rifle, and I grew up shadowing and absorbing that from him and my uncle. So we hunted locally for deer, and then we would go down to Oregon every fall, and he would hunt elk down there with his bow. Totally rudimentary. Just back then, of course, you're talking like bare bow with they still do 70-pound draw, but no sights, fingers.
Oh, no kidding, fingers even.
Fingers, and just like an instinctive compound situation. And
that's what Brandon shoots now. Did you know that he shoots without a sight?
Yeah,
I don't understand it. He doesn't shoot fingers because obviously the geometry of bows now wouldn't allow it.
It's a lot harder, yeah. So we missed a lot, and they missed a lot. I grew up just being, in camp. Obviously didn't do a lot of the hunting, but just loved being there. And fishing was never so much of the thing until I was a teenager. But once, we every fall Oregon, and then when I hit old enough to do it, I got to go to Oregon probably 3 or 4 years consecutive. It's pretty expensive, but Dad always made a way. And I got really tired of missing stuff, so I got pins and a release and started doing the conventional, modern hunter. This is ridiculous. Let's go. And so, actually, strangely enough, my dad brought home a bow for me. I was 15, and he's like, "Hey, I picked up this bow at the pawn shop, and it's a kid's youth bow. It should be perfect for you." And I go to his truck and pull it out of the backseat of his truck, and it was a brand new Matthews Z-Max. It wasn't a kid's bow.
No, but it cranked down. You could get it shorter, and you could crank it down to probably 60, maybe 50
I think around
something.
there, yeah. So I'm like, Dad, this is a 29-inch draw length, 70-pound draw bow. It's not a kid's bow. He's like, I didn't even look. It's just so small. And he picked it up super cheap at a pawn shop. And so that really got me. So now I have what was a 1-year-old solo cam that was state of the art speed bow at the time, And so we went down to the shop and they hooked it up, and he derated it for me enough to be able to shoot it. Yeah. And my dad picked up some carbon arrows that were pre-fletched and pre-inserts, full length.
Wow.
So there's 31-inch long.
You're shooting at 27 or whatever.
And I'm shooting this 27.5-inch draw with these arrows sticking out a foot past my bow. I shot my first buck with it that way. And I didn't know there was anything different about it. I was hanging tree stands and just, breeding my big brother got me a membership to Field and Stream and to Whitetail Hunter. And I was reading all this stuff on
because it was whitetails. You guys were hunting whitetails.
Yeah. You'd see muleys, but nothing decent versus I shot some really good whitetails. So yeah, hanging tree stand. I was riding my bicycle up and down the hill with my bow on my back. And my first pretty good buck. He's 126, 127 inch, 5x5. And I shot him with that Z-Max straight down 31-inch arrows. As you can imagine, the arrow hits the ground and it's still stuck in the deer. And I was
you anchored him literally.
I was pretty excited though. So I was really I had hunted and loved hunting, but that was my first bow kill. So 15, Pope and Young whitetail on the ground, and all my preseason scouting paid off. And I was just I was hooked.
Yeah.
So that was the big jump. And I didn't have any other rifle desire after that because it fulfilled I always killed stuff with the rifle and I wanted to go the next morning, and I felt like I shouldn't have shot that, man. Which now you learn to treasure all of it, but I felt like, man, it's over. I got to wait till next year again. And when I shot that buck with my bow, I was like, check, I am satisfied.
Yeah.
And it made the whole difference for me in that season of my life to just be a bow hunter, know. And in the following year, I shot a small spike elk with my bow in Idaho and just started kind of turning it up from there. So it's pretty awesome.
So high school, what did you do after high school? Was there college dreams? Was there, what was actually, let's go back. What'd your dad do for a living? Because I think this is key.
He's a general contractor.
He was a general
primarily
contractor.
A home builder, but anything that general. We built banks and churches and remodeled hospital wings, and we also did residential construction. So.
Okay. So then, was there college plans after high school? What was the next step?
Originally, yeah. So I grew up competitively shooting small bore rifle and air rifle Olympic style 3-position. And that was the whole goal was you're going to shoot, be one of the best, get a scholarship and take that off into college land. And I had that queued up and rolling all the way through my senior year. I was one of the top 2 recruitable athletes in the country. And I really bad wanted to go shoot for University of Alaska Fairbanks because they had the best school in the nation, and it's Alaska.
Yeah.
And so
sign me up.
Yeah, I was like, yeah, this is it. And in my mind, I had been taught that if you're one of the best, you get a full ride, like you would if you're in basketball or football or something else. Well, that's not true because they only can offer at the time. NCAA only allowed 2.5 scholarships per team per year, full rides. It was a real small number. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know that. So I was definitely one of the best. And my coaches told me I needed a full ride, and they offered me 40 or 50%, and which was in hindsight, that was huge. They literally took everything they had and they're like, this is it. We want you. And so It was a really big show on their side. And we were at the Junior Olympics, was where they offered me that. And I was like, man, I need to think on it. Let me get with you after the competition. You're not allowed to speak with them during the competition. Mm-hmm. And I got back, and I was in my heart, I was like, yes, but I just needed to figure that out. And at the end of the week, I was like, all right, I'm in. And he's like, well, we'd love to have you, but I got 2 of the best female shooters in the country with your one scholarship.
Oh.
And I was like, just, 18-year-old young man, you're pretty just shot in the foot at that point. And he's like, you can still redshirt, or I'll let you just shoot. You can pay for it. He was like, but I can't offer you that anymore. And I just kind of went off into la la land with not aimlessly at that point. That was everything I had worked towards. And I just like, man, I'm not so sure. Let me ponder on it. And so that was my year off. Mm-hmm. And I went to the local Bible college for 2 semesters and hunted, and then ended up just having kind of an epiphany one night. Like, you just need to build houses with Dad, and you enjoy it. And so in the middle of all that, I had an opportunity to go shoot for West Point.
Wow.
Yeah, that was pretty wild. So that was a little detour for probably 2 months. I took one of their entrance exams and talked to them quite a bit, and was very intrigued. But it was a huge chunk to bite for the commitment, and that was what shook me.
Yeah, you're like, this is a lifelong commitment. I'm going to get to shoot, but it's committing.
I think they wanted 7 years after schooling, payback time, and maybe more depending on how you did it. And then, so long story short, I was kind of doing the math. I was like, man, my dad's going to be like 70 by the time I get home, So, like, I don't know if that's a good plan. So ended up, now in hindsight, 12 years is nothing, obviously.
Right.
But when you're 18, it seems like it's everything. So I stuck on to the construction scene and learned general construction, and hunted as much as I could, to my company's dismay, but to my joy.
Not a lot of people like Brian Barney that can pull off a successful construction company and hunting all fall.
Right.
Those usually don't mix.
No.
Usually you're making your profit in September, October.
It's the biggest months. And my dad would always be like, what? You can't keep running off. And I'm like, but it's the only time I can do this.
Yeah. I can build houses the other 9 months of the year.
Yeah, please and thank you. Yeah. So that was, I'm a lot better at it now than I used to be. But there's been many, many, many September and October that Jordan was missing in action for sure.
So that's really interesting. I did not know about any of that. Well, I knew you were a competitive shooter, but I didn't know it went to that level. That had to have been absolutely daunting or demoralizing, maybe, or maybe just disappointing in just getting that dream stopped. Like, that's it, we're done.
Yeah.
This is no more. It's to be like a professional athlete, hurting themselves to the point where they can't play anymore.
That's essentially, which is, I think as a man looking back, it was navigable. But I didn't have that mentorship or
skill set
to navigate it. And so I just bagged that whole thing, and I shot for a few more months just to finish off the season, and left it all behind me and went into the world of business, which was really ultimately where my heart was at. I've always wanted to do business and make money and provide for a family that I would eventually have. That was my.
So, have you ever thought about going back and just seeing if those skills are still there? If it's like riding a bike?
Yeah, for sure. I actually did one time. I think it was about 20 years old. I went back with all my gear and I shot at a local competition, and I won with a score better than I've ever shot in my whole life. Yeah, pretty wild.
A little wisdom didn't hurt.
Being cool and calm and collected, and just not having the nerves. It was just unreal. But yeah, it's funny because none of my kids shoot. Not in that sense. Yeah. And I've definitely, you go to 4-H or you go to these different areas where they have similar things, and I'm like, man, this could be good. It would be really fun to get back into that. But I better not jump down that rabbit hole in this part of my life. That's for sure. But
you ever thought about coaching?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Even if it's at the 4-H level.
It would be, I have a little, especially in the archery world, which a lot of it carries over. It's definitely different, but very similar, but yeah, it would be fun. And if you had a local team to coach, it'd be hard pressed not to jump in there and mess around with it for sure.
So building houses, at what point did you, because you moved when I met you. You lived in Ennis, Montana, or outside of Ennis, Montana. At what point did you go, okay, Spokane's enough? Well, actually, so you met your wife in Spokane, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And was she in the Air Force?
Army.
Army.
Yeah,
okay.
she'd just gotten out of the Army and had a 9-month-old little girl who is our oldest that I adopted, Jacqueline.
Mm-hmm.
And I met her at a prospective project estimating situation. She needed somebody to renovate her basement.
Oh.
Her and her mom, they were flipping houses, and I ended up getting my card through a gal who I had knocked on her door to ask for hunting permission that morning. To this huge whitetail on this place. I drive by it all the time, and I finally saw somebody home, so I pulled in, knocked on the door. Hey, is there any chance to get a hunt here? And they're, no. I was like, I figured as much. And for whatever reason, I tossed her a business card and said, hey, we do renovation work too, because she was in a 1870s farmhouse.
Right.
And that was it. I walked out the door, went and checked cameras, and I got a phone call like 3 hours later from Marie, who is my wife, her mother, saying, hey, we got a project that we'd like you to look at. And I was like 17 foundations in that year.
Oh, wow.
I had no need for work, but my dad was semi-retiring. I was like, well, I guess we'll go look at it. And lo and behold, a week later, I pull in the driveway and my wife opened the door, which it was just a God thing. Hit it off, and I literally left there to go meet my mom and dad for lunch. And I called up. I was late, and I said, "Hey, I'll be there. I'll be there in about 15 minutes, but it'll be interesting." He goes, "Well, how'd it go?" And I was like, "Well, I'm not hip on the job, but I think I just met my future wife."
You're kidding me.
No, seriously, pretty wild. Like
that is crazy.
So yeah, and we were married 9 months later. So
oh my gosh,
pretty fast.
And that's got to be a long time ago. 20 years
2006. So we've been 18 years this last August. Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah.
That's got to be divine. I don't know anybody that I've known for 9 months that I want to spend a couple years with, let alone 18.
I had a ring built, custom built in car. I drew it and had a guy custom build it the next March, and then I had it on her finger by July 4th. I proposed to her here in Cody.
Oh yeah, the 4th of July.
Up on Cedar Mountain, we rode horses all the way up on top and sat down on the ledge, and I proposed to her up there.
Because she's from here.
Yeah,
originally.
She's a Cody girl.
Yeah. That's awesome. So how did you transition from Spokane to Ennis, Montana? That had to have been a hunting thing.
It was kind of. So it was supposed to be Dillon, but the Spokane construction market tanked, and it was now or never. And I went from 20 houses a year and 15-man crew to basically full bankruptcy with everything shutting down. And I mean, almost every builder in town lost their shorts in 06, 05, 06.
Yeah.
And so it was like, well, we don't have to stick around here. I've always wanted to go. I'm not going to Wyoming. That's a little stretch. But Montana sounds good. And so we tried to plant in Dillon, ended up in Ennis. And of course, yeah, I mean, for hunting, it was like a dream come true. And construction, it was functional. It was a lot harder than I thought it was going to be because you can only work like 3 days a week in Montana. But
yeah, especially in Ennis. The other 2 days are blowing or it's 10 below zero.
Yeah, it can just mix and match all over the place. But yeah, so we hit Montana, newlyweds. She was pregnant by the time we really settled down. And she got pregnant like Valentine's Day 2007 with our oldest son. So yeah, we were instantly 2 babies and puppies in a little 600 square foot cabin out right by Brian Barney's old place. And
oh my gosh.
That's how we met, actually. He drove right by the house I was shooting, and he's like, "Hey, man." And we just hit it off, just started chatting. Yeah.
Oh, that's crazy. So construction there, obviously hunting. There was a stint where you got, when I met you, you'd actually had a few contacts inside the hunting industry. You knew Dan Evans, who was the fall away rest, in the genius behind the fall away rest.
Yeah.
How did that all happen?
Dan was, he was like just a bow tech at the local archery shop when I was a kid.
Okay.
And so I didn't know him, but saw him, and then his pictures were all over the walls after that. So every fall I'd be like, dude, he killed 330 bulls this year, that whatever. You're just like, there's no way. And he was always a good archer. And then he started pushing his rest and shooting all over the place, and knew him well enough that sometimes we go to the shoots, and my buddy Charlie and I would shoot with him. And so I had a little bit of rapport in that sense, but I didn't really get to know him much until I got older. And then once I moved to Montana, and my buddy Charlie is really good friends with him, Charlie Melville.
Okay.
And so I'd go up and hang out and shoot, and got to know him more and more. Ended up doing a couple hunting trips with him, and just getting to be.
So he kind of went. He invented and he had Trophy Taker, and started another brand after he sold that. I haven't heard much from Dan Evans in, I don't know, years. What's he doing? Do you know?
He's enjoying life. They had a late baby.
Oh, wow.
Not this recently late, but he's got a younger girl that's a teen now. The other ones are too grown and out of the house, and Katie Jo, and he just is enjoying life. They he designs for Trophy Taker still.
Oh, that's good.
And so he spends time designing for them. And
Which is owned by Bear, I think, isn't it? I think Bear Archery owns it.
I couldn't tell you.
I'm pretty sure.
The people that bought it they owned like Tink 69 and all that back then.
Yeah.
And he took, they didn't want to buy his sight.
Stabilizer.
Or the equivalizer at the time.
Right.
So he pulled that off and restarted a whole nother branch, and that's been more of it done better for him than Trophy Taker ever did.
Wow.
And a lot of that's wisdom, right?
Right.
He showed right back up to the party with all of the knowledge of the hard struggles.
That's right.
Yeah. And
that's very cool.
They just bought a ranch up in the Bear Paws.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Jesus, there's some good elk hunting.
Yeah. It's pretty cool.
Draw the tag.
I think he was telling me the other day that it's still years, even as a landowner. Mm-hmm. He's still 3 or 4 years easy per tag.
Yep.
And that's not, it's going to get worse probably. So
100%.
As everything else we've seen in our world.
Yeah, that's right. So you've worked with us since we were talking about that before we hit the record button. You've worked with us since 2010. And the first time I really got to spend, you were writing MRSs and doing a few things. You were on TV a couple times before this. I got to spend some time with you. We went to Portland to a show, and we got to spend 2 weeks, 1 7-day stint.
Yeah.
Those shows were brutal back then. Yep. But we, hung out there. I got to meet your dad on the way home.
Yeah.
We had lunch with him in Spokane. And you've kind of been, I don't want to say in and out, but you've, depending on tags and depending on what hunts are planned and depending on your crazy life. I mean, you've done some.
It's been all over the place.
Yeah.
Very eclectic.
And you've always kind of been a force in writing and on TV here and there. But in this, you woke up one day and said, you know what? I think we're going to do something different. What caused we're going to move out of Ennis and go on the road? What was that?
Well, like Nuke, is that what you're referring to?
Yeah. Well, I mean, because you worked construction, and then for a stint you had a equipment rental business.
Oh yeah, sure, yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know how many other things you've probably
ran all over the map.
You're the constant entrepreneur.
This guy is crazy.
Starting things and moving things and changes. You told me one today. I was like, dogs?
Yeah,
you got into dogs.
Yeah,
huh?
Right.
But so what you sold your house in Ennis and decided that you're going to go nuclear.
Yeah, so I had rewinding. I'd done Nuke early on, like back when we met. I was in Nuke 2010 through 14 era, and then I just wanted to come home. That was when I ramped things up with you guys. Actually, part of the reason for me coming off the road with working for Westinghouse was to be on the fall more, being hunting longer, and we hired Dan right in the middle of that, and seasons got thicker. And a couple of our best years were in that time frame. So I stopped doing Nuke, picked up a lot more in construction, And I ran my construction company pretty hot and heavy, which is why I didn't come on full time with you guys.
It was the beginning of the boom in Bozeman. I mean,
yeah,
it was in high end stuff. You were the first one I ever heard of doing concrete countertops.
Counters. Yeah. We got into a lot of the specialty things, and it was just going really well. And so I, being as footloose and fancy free as I am, I stuck that out. And then it just got to the point where it's like, man, I literally just work and hunt. And my family's suffering from this, and my walk with the Lord suffering from this, and all the spaces that in the middle suffer because of that. And even the quality of writing that I give you, everything was a little bit on the edge there. It's like, this is too much. What are my priorities? My family, my relationship with the Lord. That's it. That's the priorities. And then from there, it trickles on from there. So we rolled up construction business into a small business, which was then pretty easy to move if we needed to over a course of about 3 years. And once it was time, it's like, my wife was like, the kids were like, we want to go on the road again, Dad. That was fun. Because they remembered traveling from when they were little.
Living in hotels for months on end.
Yeah. And at the time I was like, well, we could buy a toy hauler and just do it again. And they were like, yeah. So we sold the house, and they're all homeschooled anyway. So it's like, hey, you're kind of getting a paid field trip in a lot of ways.
Right.
And I made a phone call back to Westinghouse again, and I was back in a better position than when I left, and we just started hitting the road. And that was in 2019. And so
right before COVID.
Yeah, right before. And I sold my house at the absolute worst time. It seemed like it would have been the best time because the market had just been skyrocketing for years, I mean, it's like, there's no way this could keep going. I mean, I'm literally a third generation contractor's kid, like there's corrections and
right.
Like it's going to come. And I mean, if I would have waited for 2 more years, I would have netted $1 million.
Oh my gosh.
It was just that the difference is insane,
Jeez.
Versus netting a few $100,000, which I was happy with at the time.
Exactly. It works still.
But
jeez. So let's talk about Westinghouse. What did you do? And you were doing it, well, not the same job, but it's the same company, right?
Yeah. I still work for them technically.
Yeah. So what did you do with
Seasonally.
Westinghouse? This is really interesting. Really interesting. I didn't even know this existed. I'm glad somebody does it. If we turn the lights off, I think Jordan glows.
That might glow. So I started out in the refueling operations. So that's basically the reactor has to be serviced every 18 to 24 months, depending on the reactor schedule. Most of the BWR world, which is boiler water, I work on those primarily, are 24-month intervals. And so our team goes in and takes the reactor apart, pulls all the fuel out, so I'm a fuel mover. You use a manipulator crane, move the fuel, put it in a spent fuel pool, and then service the reactor, put all the fuel back in, and put it back together. That was the beginning and most of my career until about 18 months ago. I jumped on a crew where we do upgrades, and that's really fun. It's RCUMPs, reactor component upgrades and major projects, but they just call us the special projects team.
Okay.
And so we're kind of the special forces of the nuclear field, get our own engineering team with a very, very lethal budget and a bunch of technicians, which would be like myself that have done this for years together. And we do first of its kind a lot of time, or a new innovation of an upgrade to reactors.
This episode is sponsored by Fold AR. Have you ever wanted to carry a little more firepower than just a pistol? In the current trying times, it'd be nice to have an AR that fits in a backpack the size of a briefcase. Fold AR has solved that problem for you. They come in a few different versions: fold in half rifles, fold in thirds, and even an AR pistol. Don't worry about finding the perfect backpack to fit them in. They come in a backpack specifically for them, and they look just like a regular small pack. Fold ARs don't just fold up and conceal easily, but they are very safe and will hold their own at the range. Fold AR is the perfect combination of concealment and firepower. This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Hornady. They make some of the best, most accurate, dependable ammo on the planet. No matter if you're coyote hunting or plinking steel or hunting big game out west or even going to Africa, they make a bullet or an ammo just for you. Some of the most accurate and dependable ammo on the planet. Also, check out my podcast with Steve Hornady and learn about ammo as well as their story and some funny anecdotes from Steve. So how do you upgrade a reactor? Do you make it more efficient, or is it using the fuel better? Or I mean, what is an upgrade on a nuclear reactor?
Typically, it's efficiency. It'll either be like last fall, we did a upflow is what it's called, and it's just a flow path upgrade. So in an initial design, they have a lot of conflicting pathways with the way the water flows through the reactor, and we just go through and we have electromagnetic machining process. We can go down there and EDM out holes and create a flow path that's actually efficient and increases the volume that the unit can push. And so you can heat it harder, or more efficiently, which just makes everything better. Yeah, as much power as a reactor puts out, these things are 13, 14, 1500 megawatts. They still are only, depending on the reactor, 40, 50% efficient. Really? And there's so much lost energy in the process, because how do you harness that animal, right? It's just so big and so powerful. And now the new designs, like the ones going in Kemmerer and stuff like that, you're getting, as you can imagine, a more upgraded, higher efficiency unit than these ones, which were designed back in the 50s and 60s and built in the 80s and 90s. With a ruler and pad, and it wasn't as perfect as a CAD, computer can. They couldn't test it the way we can test it now. Yeah, honestly, it's a marvel, engineering marvel. The nuclear reactors are unreal. It's obvious that a very large panel of engineers built them versus just some whip it together situation, because they still are functioning 50 years down the road quite well. Yeah, almost 100 years later. Some of it, and it's pretty incredible. But wow. Yeah, so that's pretty neat. It's been wild. It's been an interesting, paid for us to travel the country, and the kids have seen a lot. And we're home now, though, so that's a conflicting situation. Yeah, you just bought a house here. You're setting up roots again someplace. Yeah, we're finally back. We've been planted for since spring of 23. The trailer hasn't moved, so we've lived in that same trailer since 2019. I have 6 kids, so it's been a while around, but it's a 400 square foot toy hauler. Oh my gosh. But with the way the market popped and everything, it's like, we could rent a house. But we're those people you don't want to rent a house to. You got 6 kids. 6 kids and a dog and cats and all the stuff. And they're just people just immediately reject, on a rental application. So. But you've set up roots again. Still going to do a little bit of nuclear, or is this you're moving on to back to construction and because how old's your youngest? 7. 7. Yeah. Okay, so you've got a fair amount of time. With kids still in the house. Yeah, and for your oldest is 20. Yeah, she'll be 20 in April. Yeah. Is she the one that's the rodeo queen? No, that's my youngest daughter. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, Abigail. Jacqueline. If you've ever seen these kids, you just look at them and go, I don't know who's older and who's younger. They all look the same. The older 3 are pretty parallel. Yeah, for sure. Okay, so. What's your plan now? Obviously, you're going to work a lot more with us. We're going to do TV shows and a lot more writing and a lot more this type of stuff, right? And more of a face, which will be fun. That'll be a good time. We're excited to have you back in the fold more often. Sure. Yeah. The audience has been asking for it. I don't know why, but me either. But I guess I'm relatable. I think it's because you're nuclear. I don't know. So what's in store? What's the next 6 months look like? To a year? It is more up in the air than I would like to admit at the moment, but I really feel like it's time to come home and be home. And so the question is, does that mean one more trip on the road for another nuke, or does that mean I'm home? And I got about 10 days to figure that out. So we've been on our hands and knees just praying through it and just kind of. Because when you're on the road, you're gone for like 3 months, right? I've been able to shorten that since the family doesn't travel with me, but it's still, they want a minimum of 5 or 6 weeks at a time. and without the family, which is
And
too
not,
much.
It's not like you're going there for 4 days and coming home. You're gone.
It's the whole time. Yeah.
Gone.
And they were traveling with me 100% until spring of 23.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started working with this special team, and we're 5-week jobs ish. But this spring they wanted me for 13 weeks, which
Wow.
then you're getting up into that 3 months, and I was like,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But yeah, plugged into church here in Cody. Father-in-law's here. We just bought the house with the dogs. I got a lot of work on my hands just with that. And so ideally, for my kids, my teenagers' sanity,
Yeah.
they're at a point in their lives where they need dad just there kind of
Yep.
speaking into their ear and sharing the little tidbits that I've learned. And
Yep.
so that's really where my heart's at. So maximum, I'll be gone for the month of February, doing one more jump. And then minimum, I won't leave at all, which Todd's already sent me a couple of articles that I'm going to be cranking on next week. And
Yep.
we're rolling into that season, and an MRS season is here. And construction's always a thing, but my heart would be that I would just focus on the dogs, and then of course I day trade pretty successfully, and so just try to run with the dogs and the trading in Eastmans. That's where my heart would be. So
let's talk about the dogs. I'm sure this wasn't in the plan. This was I think I might be able to get this to work, because
Right.
it was almost in this dog kennel home property was kind of in hock. I mean, it was almost foreclosed against. And so what dogs, and what's the plan with the dogs?
yeah, so they're some of the best well-bred German Shepherds in the United States sitting in those kennels there.
Really?
And a handful of Tibetan Mastiffs. So I'm not a big fan of Tibetan Mastiffs necessarily, but I love German Shepherds. So you don't get a smarter dog and their operating ability and trainability. And we've had Shepherds. I've grown up around Shepherds, and my wife absolutely adores Shepherds, so do my girls. So it was just a weird situation where we're looking at buying the house, and then there's all these dogs, and what are you doing with all these dogs? And that
Mm-hmm.
turns into a conversation. And before you know it, I'm talking to my wife about, what do you think about buying? It started out with 50 something dogs.
Oh,
And we were like, that's just too much. Let's talk a sensible number. And so we narrowed it down to 26 Shepherds. And
so is these 26, are they all breeders, or is there litters in there that are in the middle of training and going to be sold, or how does that work?
That's all breeders. So you have 21 females and 5 stud dogs. And one of the stud dogs is adolescent. He won't work for a couple of years, a year now. But yeah, and then the pups will just cycle through the process, and we'll kind of get a system with it. So the long-haired Shepherds, almost every one of those dogs is born in Germany.
Really?
They have real good lines, and they're very sweet disposition. They're like most of us in this world, German Shepherd.
Yeah, most of us think of the canine dog that's chewing somebody up. Yeah.
And I walk through the kennels 3 or 4 times now with the kids, and every dog in there we can pet, and they'll lick you right through the kennel, and they're all good disposition dogs and very well behaved, very aesthetically built.
Mm-hmm. And they're long hair shepherds?
They are long hairs, yep. And they're not a long slope. They're square back, like utilitarian style, but they can, they have all the ability to work or to show or just to be your house pet, so it's a pretty good combination. So
when you say work, what is a German Shepherd's primary work?
Guard dog, it would be
Okay.
like Schutzhund,
Okay.
or similar, that kind of situation. You can get them into bite work, police work, that kind of stuff. Drug dogs.
Mm-hmm. Canine dogs.
Yeah, anything like that. Our heart would be to get a line of working dogs built up that we could supply, like some of these missionaries and different groups that are going after human trafficking with dogs that could actually help them in the case for protection and search.
That would be
why
awesome.
not, right?
Yeah, that would be awesome.
It'd be super cool. So that's already boiling in the back of our minds. It was one of the first things my wife was like, "Whoa, what if we?" It's absolutely.
So there's going to be a learning curve, and obviously getting tied into the right marketing of that, and the right people that are getting the dogs on the ground. Literally, that'll be neat. That'll be really fun to watch. You have to keep us in the loop on that.
For sure. Yeah.
And if anybody out there that needs a working dog, or working shepherd, I thought so. My sister and brother-in-law have had probably 4 shepherds.
Okay.
They're in a collies now. Later in life, they lost a dog, old dog, and he's like, I just can't do that anymore because they were getting them. Is there something wrong with their joints? If they're bred wrong, the joints fall apart really fast.
Absolutely, yeah. Especially the short-haired shepherds.
Yeah, that's what they were.
Yeah, they have a worse or a higher propensity to have the hips fail.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So he's like, I can't go through that again. So he went to collies now, but they were really neat dogs. And I'll tell you what, and I knew those dogs since they were puppies. I still cringe walking up their house, knocking on their door.
Sure.
Because that is a big dog looking you square in the face
Yeah.
when they're standing up.
And they're intense. Yeah.
Yep, they are very intense.
Yeah, and these long hairs have a little less intensity, which I like. You know, they're just a touch more retrieverish. You know, even their look about them, they're a little bit more like, hey, pet me, versus the short hairs are a little bit like, try it.
Yeah.
Try
Let's
me. See if it goes well for you. You know, you're like,
Well, that's neat. That's really neat. So, you've had a couple really good seasons hunting wise, and you killed a really nice deer last year on public land.
Yeah.
Talk about that.
oh man,
Obviously
I mean,
not where, but not that it helps because we know guys that went back in there and there was nothing.
right. Yeah.
Did you know that deer was in there?
No, I had no idea. I mean, I've hunted that area a long time, and the genetics are definitely there.
Yeah, we've seen really good deer come out of there.
Yeah.
In the past.
Back in the day, when I started hunting there in 2008, 9-ish, and I've seen the biggest bucks I've ever consistently seen in that region. Mm-hmm. So I always go back and check on it every so often. And that was last September. I actually had a spot in mind up north that got devastated with massive winter kill the winter before. And there was like no reports about it. It was one of those things where we just didn't know. Unless you lived up there, it was a pocket that just got hammered.
Wow.
And so I'm like locked in. I hunted it the fall before, and there's all these deer in there, and I was so geeked out. Mm-hmm. But I was a Wyoming resident, so I actually put in for Montana as a non-resident.
Right.
And went up there all like excited, and there's no crickets. And so I talked to one of my friends up there he's really an amazing hunter, and he's like, dude, yeah, no, we got hammered last year up there. And I was like, ah. So I went back to my trusty spot and spent, I don't know, 3 or 4 days there in September. Got on a giant typical and couldn't seal the deal on him. Just was one of those deals. And my buddy, my good friend Matt up in Bozeman was filming for me. And it just didn't work out. We got close and then bagged it and had to go to work. To nuke job and spend all of October, which is my whole stinking Wyoming season, in New Jersey of all places, and then come home for the last little bit of Montana, which is I love Montana seasons in the sense of I hate how we kill all the deer with it, but I love
like the hunter opportunity, but not so much for the poor bucks.
The older I get, the more I see it's hard, right? But my buddy had put in that year from Western Oregon, who I hunt like Rosie's with. And I was like, well, come on, let's do it. So he came, and one of those deals where my 10-year-old had a tag because it was his first year hunting deer, and my buddy from Western Oregon. So I wasn't even really going to hunt. And then to add on to it, my buddy's gun didn't show up with him when he landed.
Oh, geez.
And so he immediately gets my gun, right?
Right. So you're one gun short anyway.
We're leaving the airport with him, gunless and headed to the hunt. And I'm like, oh, I probably won't even touch a gun then, right? We have 6 days. And I'd say we spotted this buck, I think it was the second day. And that's one thing that I do. I've wrote about it quite a bit. Like some of my buddies don't even know I get out of the truck. which is sort of a bad thing, but it's not, because I use it to find stuff, right? And I just drive the freaking tires off the truck and look with my glass at every nook and cranny that I can, and in miles of space for a day or two. And then I get out of my truck and I'll go as far as you want me to go at that point.
Right.
And we just needed to get bearings. And so looking everywhere. Well, we spotted a really decent buck for my buddy to go after, and ran in there, did our classic. It takes, you spot them from one road, and then you're 2 hours to get back it all the way up and around and into space, into place at least,
Right.
And my 10-year-old was with us, and there was 3 shooter bucks and a hot doe and a really cool, gnarly old buck that just had character all down in this basin. It was like this perfect storm, and I'm like, dude, we're gonna get a buck tonight. And we look down the ridge, probably 300 yards, and there's an orange dot. And I was like,
no.
Your heart just sinks, and you're just like, well, he was here first. I mean,
public land hunting, here we go.
And so this guy proceeds to just, like a ping pong ball, just bounce through this whole space, like from one side to the other, zig, ding, 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 all over this quadrant of deer. And he's shooting, and deer are going all over the place. And I'm like, we're going to get a deer just because he's going to run them to us. And so I like
using making lemonade out of this one.
Yeah, exactly. I grab my 10-year-old, we run down. Jeremiah's all excited. And there's this row of does popping out, and just that really cool heavy, like 3x4 was right there. And he just didn't show up. And I'm like, where'd he go? And we're laying prone, doe, nothing. And we stand up, and boo, gun goes off, and look over, and here's that guy. He literally sprint ran from the bottom to where we were and shot a spike.
Oh,
and
my
we're like
gosh.
2 miles from the truck at least.
Oh my gosh.
And so that was the end of that hunt. But we knew they're in there now. And we walk up this ridge and just sit, and it's like twilight, that perfect last little bit. And I'm spotting, see where those deer ran. And I saw this 170 frame buck I thought was the buck that we were hunting. I was like, there he is. And we set up the spotter, and we're looking, and he turned and walked in just a space, and I could see kickers sticking out both sides.
Looked like sagebrush.
And I was like, no way. He's got double cheaters off of both sides. That's not the same deer. And of course, nobody else could see it because he had walked over the hill, and that was it. But that was like night of 2.
Oh, geez.
And when he walked over the hill, he walked into a private ranch. So we were like, well, whatever. We'll keep doing what we're doing. Long story short, my boy shot a buck the next morning. Steve shot his buck that night, and right in that same little zone, real pretty 150-inch 4-pointer. And it was my turn. I'm like, well, let's keep trying to find that buck.
Yeah, now it's ingrained in me. My brain won't let me shoot anything else.
I want to see it. Yeah. And so I circled around the top zone of that ranch and just kind of checked out the draws in there, and I found a set of tracks that were just huge. And walking up into this hidden basin that you couldn't see from anywhere. So like, this makes sense. He's rutting up in here, he's feeding up in here, he's not going down to the alfalfa like the other deer. It just makes sense for where
he's grabbing
he was
a hot doe and pushing her up there.
Exactly. So we just proceeded to hunt it that way. And sure enough, the last evening we were sitting up in there, and we'd seen him from the road that morning, knew he was on public. And because we actually had hunted down the road about 5 miles, came back, and my buddy finally saw him. He was like, let me see your spotting scope. And
no.
Yeah.
Well, now that you've killed your deer, here you can see it.
He puts it up there. He's like, he was with the binoculars. He's like, now those are just rocks, because the mirage was really bad. And, and then he's like, no, they just moved. He's like, give me your spotter. And so he puts the spotter up, and he's like, oh, dude, it's your buck. And I'm like, now I'm freaking out. Like, where? We're looking back and forth. And he's like, you see that long ridge? And I'm like, yeah. He's like, that third little crease on it, right on the top of that. I was like, dude, that's public. Let's go right now. Like, we got to get in there. So that was noon, and we didn't get in there till close to 4. The time you hike all the way up and around and get
it's
to the
November,
space.
so you've got like 50 minutes.
Yeah, I think the way it was working is, I had about an hour and 15 minutes by the time I sat down and sure enough, we're there for probably half an hour, and there's like 8 does below us just bedded in this little draw and no buck. And my buddy Steve looks up and he's like, dude, there he is. And he's pushing this doe on this ridge and he's on public for like 15 seconds is what it felt like, because he was chasing her fast and right over the top, gone, you know.
Oh my god!
And he's almost in tears. He's just like, no, man, all this work, and there's just he's gone, you know. Like, hey, we got bait right here. Like, there's and that doe wants to be with those does, and like we still got 45 minutes.
Yep.
Just hang in here, man. That's all we got to do.
She will get tired of being chased around, and she's gonna come home.
Right. And sure enough, man. I mean, 15 minutes ish, 20 minutes for, and we look down the draw and here they come and they're cruising hot, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So now it's get ready. And we're laying down, getting doped up, getting everything figured out. And he got right into that basin below us and hammered him. So
wow, that was awesome.
Pretty awesome. It was a neat experience in public land, Montana. You know, hunted there for 15 years of my life, and I shot a few big ones, but
And he's what was he? 220?
No, he's not that big. He's like just under 200 inches. Is he? He's still a pretty buck though. He looks like he's 220.
Yeah, I would have guessed him 220.
Yeah.
His mainframe's just a little short.
He's small on the main, yeah.
Wow.
But
wow,
super cool deer.
That still is a 200-inch deer on public land in Montana. That you can't. I mean, that's what dreams. That's what mule deer hunting.
That's what we hunt for our whole lives, right? You
that's
just like you're looking over that next ridge, and you're like, oh, you know. I can't tell you how many times I've had that feeling, but that's why we do it.
Yep.
I was explaining that to somebody this fall. You know, it's like the anticipation of the Badlands country is amazing, because your every little pocket could hold that dream buck.
Yeah.
And then most of the time it doesn't. So you're literally going from like every hillside, every spot, everything, and every deer that pops out, you're like, there's a doe. She's being chased. I can tell. And then there's a little 3-point following her, and you're like, dang it. Dude.
Yep.
And then every once in a while it's that absolute slammer. And then you got to be able to connect at that point. And that was a rifle hunt for me, which is the first actual mature big rifle buck I've ever killed.
Really?
With a muley, yeah. I've never even pulled the trigger on a big buck before, so that was pretty wild.
So are you reverting back to rifle a little bit in your older age?
I don't think so. I think it's a opportunity thing, you know.
Yeah.
But
I agree. I think you're right. It's funny. The older I get, I really liked stretching my wings younger with the archery thing, but the older I get, because of the rifle seasons, they really, well, not in Montana, but everywhere else, they really stack the deck against you as a rifle hunter.
That's true.
You know, in Wyoming, our deer seasons are when those bucks are not in their summer zone. Right. They've stripped, so they're almost nocturnal. They're not chasing does yet. They're in that transition period, and it's not easy.
Yeah.
And, a lot of states do that, and I think Montana's probably, hopefully. At a podcast with Rod Paskey here, and he sits on the Montana Mule Deer Advisory Board, and he had went into depth what they're trying to do and what they need to do and what he's hoping they're doing. So check that podcast out. But hopefully they can move those back weeks and get save some of that pressure for sure.
Huge.
Yeah,
it'd be really huge.
So. You did kill one hell of a bull this year, though.
Yeah,
that was an excitement. It was funny. I took that bull in to get the skull. We have a guy here that bulls a skull, as you know.
Yeah.
I took that bull in there and set it next to yours. I was like,
it's a good feeling to have. For me, I mean, it's been a while since I put a big bull on the ground. Just with
public land archery hunt.
Yeah,
and your son towed behind, right?
He was there for the pack out.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So that when Brett was there with me and we were in the thick of it, and just we had a short window, first through the fifth basically, because Brett was going to take off, I think with Dan on the backcountry hunt, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
And so it was like, all right, well, let's squeeze it in there, and classic. 1st of September hunt, everything's dead.
Yeah.
Everything's hot.
And it was exceptionally hot this year. My gosh.
Toasty. Didn't hear. I was scouting with my little boys the week before season, just spotting. We were hearing whistles and having fun spotting bulls. And then like opening morning was the only frost that I saw was opening morning. Mm-hmm. And Brett and I are halfway down this big basin of just water. I mean, this place is like rut fest. It looks perfect. It's absolutely water everywhere, green grass everywhere. And I'd spotted bulls the night before up in the other side of this basin. So we purposely dropped in on the lee side and we're cutting through there. And it's light all of a sudden, and there's bulls all around us. And it's like, oh my gosh.
We're in the middle of this.
Yeah, jeez. But they were just little bulls. So we ended up just having fun watching them and repositioning for the evening to spot and finding some crankers and getting on those. And then it was so much deadfall.
Yeah.
You're slipping on these guys in their beds trying to hunt them like mule deer. And, we had 3 bulls that were, the big one was pushing 370s.
Wow.
And just a stud split 5 monster, and I'm just like, I want that bull. And it was funny because how you're supposed to follow your gut, right?
Oh, yeah.
We're sitting up on this big spine, spotting down into this thing, and I see this bull bedded. Then he's up and he's raking and he's kind of just bouncing around. I was like, we need to get down to that. There's a slide. And if I get to the base of that slide, I'll have a shooting lane, 3 directions, because this thing it's just thick in there. There's deadfall everywhere. And I don't know what I let talk me out of it, but I didn't go. I can't remember what it was. If it was pretty early
or something.
I think it was just so early. I'm like, man, if I get down there, the wind is going to just pile up against me. Well, it wasn't an hour, maybe an hour to the minute. I mean, it would have taken me 20 minutes to get down there. He walked right exactly through where I said, like perfect. And I was like, son of a gun. Brett and I went down at that point because he was on a wallow, and we were going to see if we could slip in on the wallow. We got about 60 yards from him, and he just went silent. I think they swirled a little bit. But yeah, we walked up to where I wanted to sit, and it would have been a 17-yard shot.
Oh my gosh.
Unreal, And
Trust your gut.
It's like, I know better.
Yeah, those are all data points that you've had for, hunting for 30 years.
Yeah. So it still happens, but it feels good to know that it was the right call, but it always sucks when you're like, son of a gun, that was a bull.
And you never know. You got down there, maybe the wind was doing something screwy there too. Who knows? But
then we proceeded to walk out that slide, and Brett might hate me for the rest of his life because I made him rock climb in the dark to get back to the truck.
Little did he know that was just the beginning of his fall.
Yeah, he was just like, oh my gosh, what are you doing to me? And I was like, sorry man, it looked better than it is.
Well, that's awesome. But you did end up taking a bull.
Yeah. Day 4.
I was gonna say it was close to the end of the hunt.
Yeah, it was the last night that we had, unless we absolutely had something pinned down. That was the last of it. And we sat on another really big bull, 360s-ish bull with 100 cows all day. And it was just like, I have a propensity to be drawn to those really difficult situations. And imagine that, right?
Yeah.
And I'm just telling myself, they want to cross this ridge. It's a knife ridge. The wind is in our favor. And as soon as that they start crossing, I'll be able to be slipping to a zone there, and I'll get that bull off the back like I did in that last video we did a few years ago. Like, it's perfect. Even if there's 200 eyeballs, there's a high chance this will work. Well, all his cows started climbing this, not all of them, but they were 50 yards from the top, and the rest of them split out. And whoever was the real lead cow won, and they all went right back into the desert.
Oh, jeez.
And we sat there for 4 hours for nothing. And I'm like, oh, you gotta be kidding me. And yeah, it was 2 hours till dark. And so I turned around, and there was bulls that morning off to the right side of this knife ridge. And so I turned around, and we're like, well, we got a little bit of time. Let's check it out. And sure enough, there's a bull wallowing, and there's another one over here. And I was like, well, if we cut this distance, we'll get into some space. And we're halfway there. I took the worst possible route you could dream of taking. We were bouldering and as fast as you can to get there, because we got
as quickly as possible.
Got to bust ground to get there. And if we would have just dropped off where we were, we would have had like a park walk.
Yeah.
But instead we were scrambling through rocks at Mach 1 to get over there. We show up, and right about where we thought we needed to be, and there was no elk, of course, at the moment. But I'm like, man, he was here 20 minutes ago. He's got to be close. And so I started calling, and instant fires. And you're like, oh, this is good.
Yeah.
So I just did a lost calf and a cow talking to each other back and forth. And I mean, it was like he was on a rope. And within 2-3 minutes, he was within range, but I couldn't get a shot because he walked behind a bunch of trees. And then he went into a draw, and there was 2 little tiny finger draws in front of us. I mean, he was probably at 50 yards for 10 minutes.
Oh, wow.
But that draw was in the way. And then I was trying to throw my cow calls
behind you
as much as I could. So when he got there, he would hopefully kind of walk past. No, he totally pegged me like they always do, and walked right up over the hill and just staring straight at Brett over my shoulder with the camera.
Oh my gosh.
You know, and you're at full draw.
Staring at the camera.
No, totally. I'm at full draw, and Brett's here standing, you know, over my shoulder, and it's like, you know, it's like, this is going to be hard, but I'm going to just wait. And I wanted him to take one more step because he's close enough. I could have just shot him in the chest.
Yeah, 17 yards or whatever it was.
But he wheeled. So I let down, re-ranged, and he was popped up on the other hillside at 50 something and just sunk it right through his heart like it was just perfect, you know.
Yeah.
It's like,
It's one of those awesome kill scenes, especially because, you know, how many times have you had bulls do that, come up to you and just stare a hole through you, and then they run off like they got a jetpack on, and that's it. It's done.
Yep.
No, I don't think I've ever had a bull run out and then stop again within range. It's always 150 yards.
It seems often. I knew I had a chance just because of how tight those draws were.
Yeah.
But and most draws are just so wide that they come out the other side and they're too far.
Yeah.
You know, but these things are only 20 yards across. So it's like, well, I got a little shot here, and I cow called at him and he stopped, and
that's awesome.
It was perfect. Yeah. It's an awesome experience. And, you know, I'm very excited for my first Wyoming bull. That's for sure.
Yep. That's very cool. Very cool. Well, you know, as always, I'm looking forward to seeing what comes of this, and the dogs. That'll be interesting. You have to keep us in the loop on the shepherds. What are you going to do with the mastiffs?
So for now, it's just seeing how they transition to us. But they're a highly sought after guard dog. So if they do well with receiving us as their people, then we'll continue to breed and sell them as we can.
They're huge dogs, though, aren't they?
So there are bigger versions, but the Tibetans, a big male is 150, so it's a big dog.
Yeah, but it's not
not
like
as
Great Dane size.
Absolute huge 200-pound animal, and then the females run in like 90 to 100. Oh. So they're manageable and very hardy, and won't back down from anything. You know, it'd be interesting to find out how well they intertwine with like a livestock guardian dog around the wolves in this area.
Oh yeah,
because they won't back down to wolves. So you'd have the ability to.
Are they long hair?
Very long hair, double coated.
So you don't have to worry about cold.
They love it. They thrive in high altitude, super cold stuff. So it'd be interesting if we'll train them, mess with them, see how they accept it, and then we'll kind of mess around with that a little bit, see if they do.
Are they pretty athletic? Like.
They're super chill, but very able. So
you won't have to worry about, you know, wearing them out if you're in the backcountry.
No, I mean, I don't think you're going to run them, you know, behind a team of horses for 10 miles necessarily, but I don't know. That's a good question. I'm learning about them, but they're pretty amazing creatures. So it'll be fun to get to know more about them and, you know, see if we can use them locally more than maybe just a national sales item that they are now. You know, because we have such a huge, I mean, even just, they won't back off from grizzlies either, you know?
Yeah, that's where I was thinking is grizzlies, wolves, if you can use them in the backcountry as at least the first line of defense.
Yeah. Oh, you know, they would definitely go with outfitters.
Yeah.
And hang out in camp, you know, and they're going to absolutely notify and not back down. They might die doing it, but they'll at least give you their best, you know, which is a pretty amazing attribute for, you know, 150, 160 pound big dog with the amount of hair they have. Yeah. They can take a lot.
Well, and as you know, grizzly bears are just bullies, and if you stand up to them, especially a dog, they want nothing to do with that. They're like, nope, I'm out. Now wolves, that's a different story. That they're a bully that wants to get in a fight.
Yeah, absolutely, and they're capable.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's very cool. Excited to see what comes of that and what comes of, you know, the stuff here and some opportunities to get more involved in what we're doing here and construction. And I just appreciate you coming on, and I'm really tickled that you grew roots again here. This is a great place to be a hunter. Don't tell anybody.
That's right. Yes, it's a great place to raise a family, and
it is.
It's just we're happy to be here for sure.
Yeah, so. You got plenty of years left. So.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks, Jordan.
Absolutely. Thank you. I appreciate it.